you first started, what's the biggest mistake you made? What was the big thing you had to correct? What did you do wrong when you started trying to make disciples in Croatia?
You're always pushed, like, get to the gospel, get to the gospel. You just like, so you're hitting people right up front. So immediately, what are you doing? Well, I'm helping people go to heaven or something like that, But which is culturally, you can't say that here. You cannot say that.
Oh, now he's doing some disciple making. He has a Christian, and he's talking to a Christian, and he's uploading information into this Christian's brain. But then I see this other piece of Joe's life. I've seen you walking the neighborhoods, hanging out with people in the community, just getting to be friends with people in the gymnasiums and on the basketball courts.
This is not about you right now, but
well, that was really nice, Joe. By the way, what did you say? If you want to pressure test your discipleship, take your life out of the local area and get out on the mission field. That's what we're going to explore today on the Disciple Dilemma. Hello, everyone. I'm Dennis Allen, along with Raymond Monroe, and today we're talking with Dr. Josip Debeljuh. Josip's coming to us live from Zagreb, Croatia, where he and his wife Kelly and 5 kids are helping people in that culture come to know Christ. They work with Global Outreach and the Church of Brook Hills. Dr. Joe is a basketball jock, and he's also got a D-Min from Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. Joe's fluent not only in his Baltic native language he grew up in, but also in English and Spanish, where he's got great impact in ministry with people in the Mexican, Spanish, and Latin American communities. Let's talk about the challenges of being a missionary and a disciple, and some of the lessons Joe has learned, good and bad, communicating with people in other cultures. I'm so proud of my friend Joe. I'm really looking forward to this interview. Here we go. Folks, welcome to the Disciple Dilemma, and I've got 2 of my mentors on the screen today, and we're going to have a great conversation. One of them is coming to you from Chicago, and one of them is coming from Zagreb. And if you don't know where Zagreb is, let me just make this point. As a mission field, I just don't think it qualifies as a mission field. It's a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place, both the people, the scenery, the ethos there. As we think about discipleship in the West versus discipleship in the Eastern European world, Central European world, and discipleship in Latin America, Dr. Joe W., welcome to the Disciple Dilemma, and thanks for being with us today.
It's great to be with you guys. Thank you for having me on.
Raymond, here we go. Let's have some fun with this. What thoughts do you have as we think about Western discipleship today, Ray? What kind of stuff is running in your head about what kind of a world we're living in?
I think the big challenge is the one that you identify in the book, that we've reduced discipleship to evangelism because Jesus is coming back any day and we don't need to worry about the world we live in. And as you point out, discipleship is really about all of life, our core identity in Christ. So how do we move within the Christian community from the idea that discipleship is Bible studies and small groups to it's how I live my life every day? It's Monday as well as Sunday.
Joe, I got to start out, Joe, just saying I love your bookshelf. I especially love, just right over your right shoulder, your choice of books up there. Just saying.
Joe, right off the bat, you're in Croatia and you're in Latin America. How much of what Dennis does in the Disciple Dilemma applies to those other mission fields? Are they completely different? Are we dealing with a unique circumstance in North America, or is that something that you face in Croatia and you've seen in Latin America?
I mean, the discipleship is needed globally because it's a Jesus idea. It's not a one country or one culture idea. So the cultures are different, but the need and the challenges are the same.
Joe, you have traveled the world a lot. You and your bride, Kelly, been in a lot of places. So what would you say are the similarities of discipleship in Croatia? What do you notice it's the same? What do you notice it's different among believers and discipleship in the 2 countries?
I don't see that much push here in Croatia on discipleship, and I realized it's not like that in America, but compared to Croatia, there is a lot more discipleship, I would say, in US, at least in circles that I've been around.
Give us a little bit of a taste for the folks who are watching that don't really understand how Croatia is made up. If you were to kind of carve it up religiously, what's sort of the percentages roughly of Christian, Protestants, and other religions there in Croatia?
So yeah, Croatia is a former part of the Yugoslavia, a communist country. We are 88%, I think, based on last census, 88% people declare themselves Catholic Christians. And I think evangelicals, I didn't check that, but it's 0.04 most likely. And then you have some Bosnians, Muslims, small percentage, many agnostics or atheists.
Joe, on the Catholic side, is that nominally Catholic, cultural, just come Christmas and get married in the church, or is that devoted Catholics? What's your sense?
One time I remember in the gym, I met a priest and I asked him, like, so what's the percentage of Catholics that are really devoted? You know? And he says probably 10%. 10% of those who declare themselves Catholics are really interested in talking about the faith. Most of them will not engage. It's not something that I want to talk to you about. It's something for, my priests to talk to me about or something like that. They're not willing to even engage in conversation.
What was when you first started, what's the biggest mistake you made? What was the big thing you had to correct? What did you do wrong when you started trying to make disciples in Croatia?
When I was trained, and I find my training in evangelism the best trainings I ever had, evangelism explosion. But you're always pushed, like, get to the gospel. You just so you're hitting people right up front. So immediately, what are you doing? Well, I'm helping people go to heaven or something like that, But which is a culture, you can't say that here. You cannot say that.
So you've got a very, very private personality in terms of religion in Croatia, right?
Private, secular. This is not something we discuss, but this is how we are as a people. We don't talk about death, things that are a lot more personal. So you have to earn the right to talk about, life and death. Unlike, especially in Alabama, where you can just kind of wide openly ask, so where are you going to spend eternity? That's considered very rude here, inappropriate. And I've learned that in first few years of the ministry, when I went straight up, and it was like, okay, we're not talking to you anymore. So it's a very different culture here, makeup. Even though we're 88% declared Catholics as a country, most of them do not believe they should talk about it. So it's basically an identity of the Croatian people. Catholics are basically Croatians.
So that idea of a Catholic identity was something that you perhaps didn't have, I would say, deeply embedded in your own personal life when you went to the States. And we poured into you this idea, go jump in front of people, grab them by the lapels and say, hey, where do you go to church? How do you think about Jesus? And we sent you back over with this kind of programming, right?
It's pretty much how it happened, yeah. Yeah, my coach asked me, so what you are? And I was like, I guess I'm Catholic because I'm Croatian, although I've never been to church. I never attended a Catholic service, nothing. Because my dad came from Kosovo, so my dad grew up in a Muslim household in different part of, now it's a country of Kosovo. So yeah, I wasn't raised in any kind of thought of religion or God, and especially my hometown, Pula on the coast, is probably the most atheistic city in Croatia. Literally, I don't remember one time talking about any kind of faith talk ever growing up. In club, with my friends, never ever any discussions about religion, zero.
Well, I want to probe that strategy in just a moment, but one of the things that I've watched you do over the years is you are out there among people. I've watched you not only in the classic way that you might think of a missionary. I've seen you behind the pulpit. You've been preaching. You preach whether it's in Spanish, which you're fluent in, or you're in Croatia, or you're in America. I've seen you preach in all these places. That's sort of a classic place. I'm preaching the intellectual good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Great. But I've also seen Joe, who is involved deeply in churches and connecting one-on-one with some of the people who are believers already there. And that's what I think a lot of American Christians would think about is, oh, now he's doing some disciple making. He has a Christian and he's talking to a Christian and he's uploading information into this Christian's brain. But then I see this other piece of Joe's life. I've seen you walking the neighborhoods, hanging out with people in the community, just getting to be friends with people in the gymnasiums and on the basketball courts. Tell us more about that, because I have a suspicion that American Christianity is becoming more like Zagreb's Christianity. In other words, it's my private business, stay out of my life. How did you adapt to be able to start engaging with people in the agenda of making disciples?
Well, I'm still work in progress, Dennis, on that end. But I try to be proactive, although it's challenging to meet new people. Personally, I've always been an athlete, sports guy, so I go to gym and I work out and I try to meet people there. But lately, I have not been as aggressive as in the past, intentional. So I do want to be more intentional on that. But I'm looking for avenues to connect with people. So I was trained in U.S., going to college, playing basketball, working on campus. Later on, that I was always shy, although I was always a leader in the team and stuff like that, but not like a vocal guy. And but I was trained to talk, to initiate conversations. So that helped me here in Croatia, and it's still helping me, because I see all through relationships. I see all through engagement, and maybe I'm sometimes too transparent. Sometimes it hurts me because Zagreb is becoming less and less. It's becoming more and more like a Western side of the world. I used to tell Kel like 20 years ago in Zagreb, in Croatia. I mean, you got friends, you hang out all day, things like that. But it's not like that anymore, especially not in the capital city, So you kind of have to adapt, and so part of it is your personality, part of it is your training, part of it is being open, and part of it is just learning by failure. Learning that this is not going to work here. But there's all the other side. You could become desensitized to any kind of proactive, intentional making disciples, and if you're only waiting, nothing's going to happen.
So, as a disciple maker, which I know is at your heart, what is it you kind of do between 6 a.m. and midnight when you're not doing stuff with the family? What do you do around Zagreb that is helping to advance your view of what you're called to be about?
Whatever gifting that you have, or like a skill, maybe. Like I was a basketball player, so when I came here, I immediately played for the club locally. Then I ended up being a head coach here in the local club. So that gave me opportunity to connect with the guys. I still hang out with the guys every Friday night. We've been friends for 15 years. There's 10, 15 guys that we meet. Some I meet one-on-one. We got a grill party once a year, things like that. And then other relationships in a church and within the local church or believers that I know. I reach out on daily basis to somebody, like, let's meet, let's grab a coffee. Our coffee here is a little different than your coffee in US. So I just, and I have to be on it, because I have to admit that the more I'm in this culture and the less you are around people who are intentional, you become more like that. So I'm realizing that over last couple of years, that I need to be more intentional and have a strategy to make disciples, which is a big word in the US. We don't like to use these things here. But if you don't have any strategy, like, how are you going to meet anybody? Because people don't say hi here.
That's got to be a little tough, Joe, because your hit rate, if we could just be that crass and use an American term here, your hit rate on people saying, "Oh, Joe, I see what you do. I see how you think. I want to be a disciple even though I don't know Jesus." That's got to be a pretty low number because of the world you're in. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's not many people that want to be disciples within the church, or they. But this is a global issue, actually. That the younger believers they did not ask to be discipled. So, older believers, it's our responsibility to initiate these conversations. In my opinion, I've been thinking about it a lot. But yeah, it's definitely challenging, especially in a country where there's not that many believers or people that are not willing to engage with you in the spiritual conversations.
Well, I'm thinking about this from a standpoint of process, and I think that largely in the U.S., while the strict idea of discipleship isn't simply and only evangelism, it becomes the most palatable oatmeal, as it were, or baby food, as it were, to help someone get an idea of what it is we're starting a journey together on. It's like, I need you to understand who Jesus is, what Jesus did, why Jesus matters in your life to get going. So we have to be evangelical. But would you take us a little further down the road, not only in evangelism, Joe? What are you thinking about? What are you looking for in a person if you say, this person is developing well as a disciple? What are some of the marks that you think about as a disciple maker?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely ultimately that they will become disciples makers themselves. Yeah, I mean that would be a goal, but sometimes those goals are not achievable, especially in this culture where we live in. So, I personally, I just want to be a friend to whoever is out there and willing to engage, and regardless of whether they come to faith on Christ or not, I want to continue to be a friend.
Raymond, Joe's sitting here talking about friendship. I think that's got to be deeply antithetical to everything you think about in discipleship, right?
Yeah, I mean, you and I have already had a conversation about an essay that someone wrote here in the US that friendship was fundamentally different than discipleship because somehow friendship is unintentional and discipleship is intentional. And I, of course, as you know, I push back. I believe that the core of discipleship is not fundamentally evangelism. It is living for Christ together as peers, where we share our lives and we're maturing in Christ so that we can spread his love. So, Joe, one of my real passions is our purpose and meaning in life are all the vocational roles that God has given us. And I'm supposed to be a good father. That's what it means to be a disciple. I'm supposed to be a good church member in terms of making the coffee. That's being a good disciple. And I really, I can make friends of non-believers, and discipling in that role means sharing the gospel with them. But I also have friends who are Christians, and I need their encouragement. I need to encourage them in the faith.
We see in the Great Commission, the text presumes that the nations don't have the gospel. So we as believers, we have to proclaim the gospel for those who don't know it. How we do it, that's different. We do it all different ways. I mean, the gospel is the gospel. But I'm saying how we do it is different, but it's there too. We need to proclaim the gospel, right? I look at it, every relationship different.
Yeah.
In my relationship, whether it's non-believers or believers, it's all about that relationship, the unique relationship that I have with that person, individual person. If they are more open then or less open, it all depends on that relationship.
And of course, one of the things you mentioned the Great Commission, somehow we reduce that to conversion, which is not in there. We're supposed to give them a new identity by baptizing them so that their whole sense of who they are is following Christ. And then the main task we have is teaching them to keep his commandments. And so really, we tend to stop doing discipleship at the very point that Jesus tells us what it is, of teaching them to keep his commandments.
Joe, tell me the story so our folks can hear this. In college, you had a guy who was important in your life and discipled you. Give us a little bit of a view of what that looked like.
So I had two guys, Neil Wither and then Dr. Al Chestnut. Basically, and I had other guys like, and I have to say these names because these guys are still connected with me and still good friends. Paul Husband, he was the first one to share the gospel with me. He asked me to go to the store. Just what I experienced in college was just unusual, especially coming from Croatia when people are not that generally upfront friendly, you know.
Yeah.
Croatians are very friendly when you know them, loyal and all that. But upfront, we're not that because we're a cold culture. And I experienced this friends coming asking me, you want to ride this, the other. And then next thing, hey, you want to go to church? I'm like, sure, I'll go to church. But I came in a Christian school, you know, so coach prayed. Some professor prayed before class. Coach prayed after the game, practice. So it was kind of becoming more normal. But what I've seen is like I've seen people being very different. And that attracted me, you know. And then I started meeting with my friend Neil some and then Al, who was and still he's an elder at First Press in Jackson, and just being patient with me, because I didn't want to get up, I didn't want to go to Bible study at 7 o'clock in the morning. So it was a long process for me. It wasn't like I was on fire for the Lord in college. I was not, but people invested. They stood. How do you say? Stuck with me. They stay stuck with me.
Stuck with you.
They stuck with me, and then kind of my faith really took off when I joined a church.
So these relationships, which also provided learning, but primarily relationships, have continued on. You've still got these people in your life.
Yeah. This summer went to see Paul Husband, his family, then Al Chestnut, of course, and Betsy. We stayed in touch, and then Neil and his wife Marty. Saw them all this just last summer, and then some other guys that my friend Tim Sensing, and then David Horner, basketball guys that we stayed in touch. And then you came along, Dennis. You came along.
Oh no!
Hey, Raymond. This is what Dennis says. Hey, like when I don't know, what was it? You met me before, but 2017, you asked me like, Josip, I want to stay connected. And I told you, like, you can stay as much as you want. Because I've heard people telling me they want to stay connected, but then they would just kind of drift, you know. So I appreciate you, Dennis. And I don't know if I can talk about you here, but just the relationship. You are kind of goof off a little bit. Is that the good word? Goofy. But yeah. You, Dennis and Ray, you know that Dennis knows what does it mean to make disciples, and I've learned a lot from you, Dennis. How to be a good asking good questions and then follow-up questions and good listener. I told one time Kelly, Dennis is the best listener I've ever heard. Sorry, I have to. So.
Folks, welcome back to the Disciple Dilemma. We're talking with Dr. Joe Debeljuh, who's with Global Outreach and the Church of Brook Hills in Zagreb, Croatia, which is where he's meeting with us on this podcast from. Joe, you're fluent in Spanish, English, obviously Croatian, because that's your world, that's where you came from. What's the difference that you sense in the Roman Catholic Latino world, which is predominantly Roman Catholic, versus your Croatian experience and your U.S. experience? What are some of the contrasts there?
A lot of it's cultural, you know. So the way people communicate, and it took me a while to understand that. But you know, like Europeans are cold, cold nature. Latinos are warm, very open to basically anything. And U.S. South also very open, warm. North, I've never been to North. Ray, you could speak on that. So. On culturally, that's a big part of ministry, and you as a missionary, you need to understand where you're going. and learning from the local people. It's something that I love doing. That's why one of the reasons I do go overseas.
I'm really fascinated with the role of a missionary because I think there are some tensions, some contravening pressures that pull on you. So, for example, I just wonder if among friends of yours who are missionaries, do you feel the pressure sometimes to notch the gun belt and tell your sponsors, okay, this is how many people have come to Jesus? Is that a pressure that distracts sometimes from the work as a disciple maker? How does that pressure fit in your world?
I mean, I can't speak for other people, you know. I've read some newsletter, things like that, but I could tell for me, all of our supporters, our home church, the Church of Brook Hills that sent us here in 2008, I have never been once, even once, pressured about any kind of results of evangelism and numbers. So I've been blessed in that sense.
So when you think about the first few conversations with people that you're meeting in the Latin American world, what kind of things do you find are interesting, motivating for them, insightful things for them that make them want to lean in a little closer to learn a little more about you versus things that push them away? The cold European style probably doesn't work real well. How do you find ways that open doors in the Latin America world?
When you start talking individually, which recently I haven't had time, but before when I did a lot of basketball, you realize even though everybody's open, the people don't get it. They don't get discipleship. They're not walking with the Lord. So in that sense, at least from my experience, a lot of people there are not even, they might be claiming they're Christians, but they might not be believers. Living with the girlfriends after you find out some things, you know. Here, I think that, especially with my last year being in the States and working and reaching out to Latinos and spending time with individuals, I think here, Westerners, I'll call Americans, Northern Americans, have a great opportunity, really. Great opportunity. There's this gap, cultural gap or presumption that Latinos don't speak any English. And you'll see that when I work out, like I said. So I'll go YMCA every day. And we had the janitors. They were all from Latin America. And now I never saw, Americans engage with them. And I'm like, wow, this is an opportunity. This is just a sample. But then I also talked to my strong believers. And they said, it's interesting how, Americans will go to short-term mission trips to Latin America, spend all this money, but then when they come back, they don't hang out with us. There are some who are reaching out to Latinos, but not nearly enough as could be possible. There's so many Latinos in the United States, and they're growing, and they're open, and they like Americans, and there's a great opportunities for people like you and me to reach out to them, and they're willing to learn. So when I engage with them, and I've asked several leaders, hey, can I come, teach them discipleship, whatever. They were wide open, very surprised. And I got to disciple 2 men while I was in U.S. I didn't even call it discipleship. But one young leader told me, like, man, you've been discipling me for this whole year. I'm like, well, glad that we connected, And then I see him preaching today, at times, and I'm just encouraged. And
so for that great opportunity, many churches I know go to Central or South America or Mexico for a 2-week mission trip, and they build houses and they do Sunday school and they do vacation Bible school and they come back. I think you're brilliant to say once they've done that, they should reach out to the local Latino community. How would they do that? So I've been down to Tijuana, I built 4 houses, I come back to Crystal Lake, Illinois. There's a Latino grocery store. There's clearly a Latino community here. And we have that church has virtually no Latino presence. How would you do that? How would you begin to reach out into that community?
I mean, I would basically, on individual level or group level, I would just reach out to whether your church has Latin church, or if not, just a local church that you think preaches the gospel, and reach out to the Spanish pastor. Most of the Spanish pastors in the United States speak English. So you can reach out to them, and some people are doing it. I'm not saying that people are not doing it. I'm saying there's a great opportunity to do a lot more. And then talk to the pastor and say, hey, look, I'm here. But one of the things in US, people just say stuff that they're here, but then they are like gone after a few weeks, you know. So first of all, are you committed to this? And if you are, and then start learning maybe Spanish language, because sooner or later you're going to be able to take advantage of it in many different ways. Because so many people are Latin, Spanish speaking in the United States, and maybe even you can use it for your own business. But I would reach out to the local pastor of that church, that identify the church, and then there might be young people who speak English perfect. And if you're into disciple making, you want to mentor young men or women, if you're a lady, there's plenty of opportunities. Latin church where people, the pastor, if he trusts you and if you connected well, you could disciple these people in English, because young people, Spanish people speak English.
Joe, there's going to be some people who are very curious about how they can get in touch with you and how they can follow you. So if we want to creep Joe Debeljuh's life, he and Kelly and their adventures, how do we do that?
I guess the best way to find us is at globaloutreach.org. Over there, there's a contact there. There's an email, I guess. Email Josip Debeljuh. You can.
Folks, you're seeing both Joe's website where you talk about global outreach. You'll see that here on the screen as we're talking, and then Joe's email is going to come up as well in case you want to follow up more. And I'm just going to encourage everybody, if you are a believer in Christ and you're really interested in discipleship, you ought to take the pilgrimage to Zagreb and get a day or two with the Debeljuh family and watch what's going on there. It's fantastic. Dr. Joe Debeljuh, thank you for joining us today on the Disciple Dilemma.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
And it's a delight to have you as a mentor, coach, and a teacher and a friend in Christ, bro. Thanks for what you do.
Enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you, Karen. And Ray, thank you for joining us, Ray.
Oh, it's been a delight to talk with you. It's been great fun. And I really appreciate what you're doing in Croatia and your insights into what it means to be a disciple. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you help the church think more about discipleship? Would you help us get the conversation started to talk about the biblical discipleship Jesus gave us? Please follow us. Our website, www.thediscipledilemma.com. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all the RSS feeds. If you'd follow or like us, you'll help us get leverage in the digital marketplace to talk about the fact that discipleship needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.